Welcome back to the channel, guys. So we're going to go through a few exercises all on the floor down in seated to stretch the hips and mobilise the hips a little bit. So we'll get straight into it. Bring yourself down onto the floor when you're ready. You're going to have your feet flat to the floor, leaning back onto the hands, so quite a relaxed, comfortable position here. And then all you're going to do, with a little bit of space between the legs, you're just going to start to roll the knees from left to right. So nice and slowly, it's kind of like window wiper kind of motion through the legs, moving the knees a little bit. And this is getting internal and external rotation through the hip. So when you go over to the side, one hip will be in internal rotation and the other hip will be in external rotation. So this is quite a nice exercise to do if you do a lot of the same thing, whether that's sitting, walking, running, cycling, anything like that. That's a nice exercise to just give you a little bit more movement, a little bit more variety in the hips. It's quite gentle as well. So the next one that we're going to come into is a bit more of a stretch, but you can use this in lots of different ways to get the back moving a little bit more as well. So we're going to come into your straddle. Now with this one, everybody is going to look quite different. It depends on the ball and socket joint, whether it's quite closed, in which case you'll be a little bit more restricted, or whether that socket is quite open and you'll have a lot more movement in your leg. So the point with this is don't worry about what it looks like. It doesn't matter whether the legs are all the way out to the side or whether this feels like it's a stretch for you. If it does, that's fine. We'll go with that. Now, a couple of ways that you can change this up or modify it again just to suit you a little bit better. Firstly, sit on a block or a couple of books. If you've got some yoga blocks handy, that's great. A few books just to lift the hips up a little bit higher. If you haven't got anything like that handy, even just a few cushions can make quite a big difference. So lift the pelvis up a little bit if it feels really, really uncomfortable, really tight, or you feel like you can't sit tall. If you feel like sort of really slouched here, we want to be able to sit tall. So just lift the hips a little bit and that can help. The second thing you can do here is to bend your knees. So this can make all the difference sometimes. If it's the hamstrings that are a little bit too tight here, just pulling the knees up slightly, that can really help as well. And then the last thing you can do here, which is really simple, is just to lean back onto your hands. Now that again just changes the angle at the hip. It takes some of the pressure out of the hips and the back, so we can just take that work into the arms instead. And your goal here is just to try and relax in the hips. Now, if this feels okay, and you want to take it into a slightly stronger stretch, then let's start to think about coming forward. So you can come down onto your hands, you can come down onto your elbows, you can go all the way down, bringing the chest down towards the floor or the head down towards the floor, so you can just take that as far as you feel you can. Now the thing that I want you to just be aware of as you do that, and this is the same for wherever your legs are and however far you're going forwards, try and think about sitting tall so we create this length through the spine. The temptation with this, particularly if it does feel quite tight for us, the temptation will be to kind of reach as far forwards as possible, but actually we're rounding the back quite a lot. So what we want to do instead is to lengthen the spine. Try and imagine that you're trying to get your head and your shoulders as far away from your hips as you can. So try and lengthen. Even if you're a long way down, even if you're just trying to think about tipping forwards, think about that length rather than reaching. Grow tall and then tip forwards from the hip. So that's your straddle. That's another nice stretch that you can come into. And then the last one that we'll think about here down on the floor for your hips is a little bit of a, it's another stretch for the outside of the hip this time. So your straddle got more of the inside of the hip. This one's going to get more of the outside here instead. So again, staying down on the floor, down in seated, leaning back onto the hands, you're going to come into a 4-sign stretch. So you're going to bring the outside of one ankle onto the top of the other thigh. Now you can do that with the leg straight, the bottom leg straight, if that makes it a little bit easier, or just do it with the leg bent, whatever works for you. Leaning back onto your hands again, and then you're just going to try and shuffle that bottom leg closer and closer, bending the knee so we kind of crank up the hip, crank up the stretch a little bit on that hip. Now again with this one, try not to be really slouched. If you do find it's really difficult to sit tall, send that leg away from you and lengthen up through the spine, rather than drawing it all in but being really, really crouched down here and slumped in the spine. So sit tall, prioritise the back. Use the arms very much here. switch the core on a little bit, but you can lean back onto the hands. Now you can hold this for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes if you want to, really try and relax into it. If you're holding it for longer, then try and have your sort of mindset on relaxation. Try and switch off. We're not trying to be in a really, really intense position or stretch for a long time. If you're holding it for longer than a minute or so, then just try and switch off a little bit and relax. Bring that down, give the legs a little bit of a shake out, and then you can do that on the other side. So again, just finding your way into it slowly. Now with this one, a nice variation that you can do, or a little add-on you can do if you want to, is just to take the top foot towards the floor a little bit. So it's like you're doing those window wiper exercises again. So just taking that top foot down towards the floor. Don't take the shoulders with you, so keep the hands back behind you, and you'll probably just feel a little bit extra stretch around that hip. This is also nice to get a bit of rotation into the lower back as well. So you can just give that a try if you want to, spice it up a little bit. As always guys, go gently. If it doesn't feel quite right or if it feels a little bit uncomfortable, just be your own teacher a little bit, listen to your body, but give any or all of those exercises a go if you want to just try loosening up the hips a little bit more.